Hey, good morning. I want to tell you a few lighthearted stories and then drive home a point. Um, when I was pastoring in California, a man came and accepted Christ at our altar. I led him to Jesus, and then at the conclusion, he reached into his pocket and he pulled out a pack of cigarettes and he put it on the altar and he said, "I give up and I renounce smoking from this point on." He said, "Pastor, I want you to keep those cigarettes and I want you to take them and I want to come see you sometime. I want you to pull them out as a reminder of what I gave up." And I said, "Okay." So I took the cigarettes and put them in a file cabinet. I believe he came a couple of times, and I reminded him of what he gave up. And then I didn't see him anymore, but I forgot that the cigarettes were in the file cabinet in my office. And then not long after that, I was conducting a funeral for a man at our church, and his son-in-law was giving the eulogy. And unbeknownst to me, he had placed some sacks of vegetables underneath the pews to hand out to those that were there to pay their condolences to the loss of his man. And he went on to explain, "Oh, my father-in-law, he loved to grow vegetables, and underneath your pews, some of you will find some sacks of tomatoes and cucumbers." And people reached down to there, got them, and they just held them up, and it was kind of a impressive moment. And then he said, "Oh, but my father-in-law, he loved to drink his beer. And underneath your pew, you might find some beer." And my eyes got real big, and all of a sudden I started hearing, and people were opening up beer in the sanctuary, starting to drink it during the funeral. I stood up and I stopped. I said, "Stop. You're not drinking beer in the sanctuary." I said, "When you leave here, you can leave, but you're not drinking it in God's house." It was one of those most awkward moments that I think I've ever experienced. And then on the next day, which was Sunday, one of the head ushers came to me and he brought me a can of beer. He said, "Pastor, I found a beer underneath one of the pews in the sanctuary. How did that get there?" I said, "Bill, give me the beer." And I took the beer, took it to my office, and placed it in the same filing cabinet with the cigarettes, not thinking that I would just later take that and throw it away, and forgot all about it. Well, years went by, and we were moving to Arizona, and the movers and the packers had came to pack up my office, and they were going through packing up books and things in the file cabinets that I told them to pack up. And I went over to open up the one file cabinet, looked in there, and realized the beer and the cigarettes were still in the file cabinet. I go, "Oh my goodness!" And I quickly shut the door, and I said, "Hey, I got this one, guys. I got this one." And so that night, about midnight, I was sneaking up to the church to take and throw away the beer and the cigarettes. And you might think, "Well, why is that such a big deal?" It is. If the pastor is caught smoking or drinking, it's not too good, particularly in our denomination, or really for any pastor. To as far as that concerned, image in who we are as believers in God is important, but for all of us, that is true. It's important that we live out, particularly if we call ourselves Christians, as someone who really backs it up and supports the fact that we live out victorious, that we've conquered some things that we know that has caused us some pain and heartaches. You may or may not think some things are right or wrong. It's between you and God. But for me, there was this fact that I have a responsibility to live out what God has called me to live out. So, well, why would that be true? Well, let me give you another funny story. My youngest son was with Deanna and I as we took out some of our church leaders from our church in Tucson. There was probably 10 or 12 people sitting around a round table, and my youngest son, who was a preschooler, said, "Dad, are you going to order a beer?" And I said, "No, darling, you know I don't drink beer." "Oh, yes, you do, Daddy. You got beer in the refrigerator." Boy, you could hear a pin drop. My church leadership just stopped and stared at me like, "You drink beer?" And I said, "Darling, why are you saying that?" I grabbed him up, took him to the restroom, and paddled his bottom and said, "You quit telling everybody that I drink beer." We went back and sat down. Oh, my goodness, what an awkward moment. People didn't know what to say. It was a quiet meal for the rest of the meal, and I'm trying to say, "I don't drink beer. I don't drink beer." And later on, it dawned on me it was root beer. He didn't realize root beer was not beer, and he just associated. And I called up all the members, the leadership, and I said, "Hey, root beer, root beer." Oh, sure, sure, Pastor. It was kind of one of those awkward moments, but it's important for you to realize that they didn't want me to do things that was deceiving. We live in what we call the woke society, the political correct society, we have to say the right things and do the right things, and anything we say will be held against us. It can sever relationships. We have protests going on right now that went from protest against discrimination or racism to now moving into other arenas of ideologies and philosophies that if you're not going to agree with those people, they're going to act out, whether it's looting or beating somebody. In this day and age, we will literally take someone else's life. We're in a political campaign going on where our politicians are smearing each other, embellishing, and not telling the truth about each other on both sides of the camp. I mean, there's such hatred that we see going on. How do we get past this? How do we work through the indifferences and the different opinions and the different thoughts and in our different ideologies? How can we still get along even though we don't agree? Lori Loughlin, the Aunt Betsy from Full House, was sentenced to 2 months to jail yesterday. And here's a lady that we all just grew up with loving and thought, boy, she could never do anything wrong. Sadly, she did something wrong in trying to bribe her way into a prestigious school to get her daughters into the school. She's paying the price. She's lost her fame. She's lost all of her TV shows, and people now have labeled her as a crook. Are we redeemable? Can we get past some of these things? There's people in our own personal lives that said something, or we've said something to, that we think that there's never going to be any chance we could ever get along again. In the Bible, there are 2 books called 1st and 2nd Corinthians, and the Apostle Paul wrote these books to a divided church. And in these divided churches, he is trying to bring them together, and he talks about love, and he said love is patient, love is kind, and it does not envy, and it does not boast, and love is not proud, and it doesn't dishonor each other. And then he ends by saying there's 3 things: faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. I don't know of any other way. I don't know of any other way how we can still get along with each other, even if we don't agree with one another, but through love. Love conquers all. If you can explain another way on how that's possible, I ask you to do so. But because of the love of God in us, what we call agape love, what Christ gives us, we have the ability to still love each other with not always agreeing. We still have the ability to love each other even if we have a different political conviction. That is what I think will save this country right now. If somehow we can come together, because we're human beings created by God in the image of God, and that we can learn how to love. Anyway, I hope you have a great day. And if somebody asks you to hold something that might get you into trouble, maybe you are to not do it. That I learned on my own. Have a great day. Take care.